hosting stuff, virtualization, data center automation. And I wanted to tell you something about Varnish today. I'm using Type 3 Science version 3.5, which is quite a long time, I think about 10 years. And in my spare time, I like to do anything else not related to computers, like driving my Volkswagen camper car or do paragliding. I'm up there. So the agenda for today is first a little bit about Varnish, the company, but also the software, of course. Then what does Varnish basically is and does, and how can we integrate Varnish into Type 3, and in the end, a few case studies with sites which we implemented Varnish through the last year. About the company Varnish, first of all, it was 2005 where Verdensgang, which is a newspaper in Norway, had a problem with their servers because everything very slow and bad. And they approached Paul Henning Kamp, which is a Danish FreeBSD kernel hacker, with this problem. And they had the idea of doing something which is now Varnish, do caching, make everything faster. And Paul Henning discovered very fast that he is a very good programmer, but not a really good project manager and to organize stuff like that. So they approached Red Pill Limpro, which is a company in Norway who does open source software. And they took the whole management stuff over, and Paul Henning had to focus on his code. After a time, I think about 2 years later, something like that, they invented a new company called Varnish Software, and which does everything related to Varnish, like marketing, things like that. It's BSD licensed, and also a commercial license is available with some subscriptions. I talk about that later on. Varnish, the company is quite a small company. They are about 13 employees, I think, totally, with marketing, everything. And they rely on worldwide integration, hosting, and trainings partners. And we are one of them for the German, Swiss, and Austrian area. Compared to other software, Varnish is quite new. The first version was in 2006. So it's very modern build. Then about the software, it's basically a web accelerator, which works as a HTTP reverse proxy server. It's written in C, and it's highly efficient because you won't recognize any load from Varnish on a usual server. It just does his work, and you don't see anything in the process like you can see PHP processes or Apache processes. It's just there and runs. It stores every object in the virtual memory data store, which means it's just put into the RAM, and the system can decide if it's kept in the RAM or if it's too big to swap it into a swap partition, but it's entirely not Varnish related, like other systems who does things like that by themselves, but Varnish just stores it into RAM and leaves the decision about actually where store the data to the operating system. So why should you use Varnish? Of course, to speed up your website, because you can enhance the customer satisfaction. If it has nobody likes slow sites, and to unburden your servers and therefore you can lowering your costs significantly. And because it's highly flexible, there is a configuration language where you can put in some hacks, things like that. I'll show you that later on. Well, as I said, speed up your website. Nobody likes slow sites, and a fast response gets you a happy visitor. It's good for SEO optimization, and you can handle traffic peaks and even DOS attacks very easily because it's just blazing fast. And there is some marketing, I don't know, thing that's 1 second delay in a page load leads to 7% loss in conversions, 11% fewer page views, and 16% lower customer satisfaction. And the other very good thing is, of course, you can unburn your servers. You can have fewer servers, smaller servers. It's highly efficient. Varnish can handle up to 250,000 requests on just cheap desktop hardware. No multiple cores, things like that. It's just blazing fast. Usually you put the bottleneck away from the server but into the network because, of course, the server has to be connected to the internet somehow fast enough to deliver all those requests. You can make huge cost savings regarding to hardware, but also electricity, rack space. There is a sample of a town in Norway which had run a website, and they had 14 servers to do that before because there were a lot of oil companies and they had to put out a lot of informations. And after they implemented Varnish, they went down to 2 servers, not because they need to, because just redundancy. 1 would be enough. And the graph on the right down is from this village, where you can see the answer time of the website, which was quite high before and is very, very low now. The other graph up is one of our customers, where we implemented Varnish at 12 o'clock here. And this is the CPU usage, which went down from 400%, 4 cores, to 100%. You can get redundancy very easily because you can just use multiple Varnish servers. It's just HTTP. You have to configure everything, but it's quite, compared to other solutions, quite easy. You can distribute them globally. For example, we use Amazon EC2 for Varnish instances, where you can just choose, I want some instance in, I don't know, Japan or Australia. Very easy, very fast. You can use Varnish as a load balancer and don't have to have other hardware-related load balancers, very expensive things. Varnish can do that by default. Then you are able to make some configurations in VCL, which is the Varnish configuration language. There is something like a state machine. The states are down there, and you can implement codes in every state. For example, receive a request from a client and alter them whatever you want. Those configurations are compiled into C code and linked into the Varnish process, so it's very fast, of course. And usually you delete or add HTTP headers and work with regular expressions to do something. For example, add a cookie or remove a cookie, things like that. And you can even put in their business logic, like has this visitor access to the site or whatever, some hacks, because it's the first place where a request comes in, and it's very, very fast. Better than do it, for example, in the PHP code somewhere, hack something into it. You can do it on Varnish. Yeah. Then there are a few more features, like edge side includes, where you can mix static with dynamic content. It's something like iframes, basically, but the iframe is processed and inserted from Varnish and then on the client. We don't use that too much because I think regarding to typo 3, it's useless because the request has to go to the private one has to go to typo 3 anyway, and it doesn't really matter if typo 3 creates a whole page or just a part of a page. If you want to use that, you have to make sure that those edge side included requests are very, very fast. Varnish does its own login, but not in files, but only in shared memory log. There are other processes which can read this log out of the shared memory and write it in a file if you want that. But by default, it writes to shared memory only. Also, because it would be quite fast, a bottleneck to write logs to the file system on a very, very big site. And well, as I said, it's a server-side HTTP proxy. And because it's HTTP and it's a proxy, everything is already very well standardized. Proxies are known since, I don't know, forever. And it's just that you have usually 10, 20 years ago, you had a proxy in your company to deliver the website fast, and now the proxy moves from the client side to the server side. But the whole protocol and headers, things like that, everything is already in place. And you can use some magic in VCL in the configuration language, but it's not really required, just in special cases. For example, typo 3 related is in the resive. You can return everything without caching if there is a backend typo 3 user cookie present, because we won't want to cache requests from a logged-in backend user. He has to use the admin panel and preview and whatever. There are a few commercial modules available in some subscription editions. The administration console, custom statistics, paywall, and even a few more. I just want to give a short overview, but you can achieve with them. There is the Varnish administration console, which is a interface, a web interface, where you can control multiple servers and have some nice real-time graphs. Maybe put it on a screen in your office somewhere if you're on your own big site. There is Varnish custom statistics, which is a real-time data store, also in shared memory, like the log. And you can query this data with a JSON API. And it's useful for things like what's hot now, for example, for a newspaper, which articles are reads the most, or for parse times, whatever. It's very flexible in your use and very fast, of course. And then the Varnish paywall is used as access control for also newspapers, magazines, or also intro or extranets, where you can just move the access control out of, for example, typo 3 into Varnish. And you have to deliver contents to very, very much peoples. And you can also, it's very, you can implement it whatever you want, like ABOS, micropayment, metered access, something like you can access 5 articles, and after that you have to pay something. Well, that's up to you. There are a few more models available, like mobile device detection, where you can decide on Varnish side, is it a mobile client or not, API acceleration for APIs. The Hash Ninja plugin, I will come to that later, and much more, which are listed on the website if you're interested. So, how can you integrate Varnish into Type 3? There are already a few extensions available to do that, so it's a long time. But we decided to make something new because it was quite hard to install them and they had sometimes break a lot of stuff. We are following the KISS principle, which means keep it simple and stupid, don't use too much code, have a minimal system impact. It's required that you have Varnish version 3. All the other extensions are based for Varnish 2. And we use it with Type 3 4.5 and now 6.2. It's based on the page ID of a given Type 3 page. And therefore, there is no lookup magic required. All the other available extensions go through, for example, the real URL table and try to get all URLs out of there, which are for a given page, and send them to Varnish to clear. With our solution, this is not required. It's entirely based on the page ID. There is no X side includes support. Therefore, we need no ugly X-class things on tsleep.fa or whatever there is. And it used Type 3 core functions and configurations whenever possible. So it's quite easy and very, very little. It's about 5 files, something like that. The technical background, it sets configs and cache headers. So the Type 3 core will send out proper cache headers as long as the site is cacheable, which means no cache has to be 0, and there are no user int objects, user int, whatever. And then it sends the page ID of the current Type 3 page to Varnish in a custom HTTP header. So Varnish knows which page has which page ID in Type 3. And in the clear cache command of the Type 3 backend is a hook which takes this page ID of a given page and just sends it to Varnish and says, those page ID 100, whatever, clean them up. So it's very, very easy, very straightforward. And there is a VCL, a Varnish configuration, which does all the processing. It removes the headers for the page ID. Those headers are for Varnish only and won't get to the client. And it removes the set cookie header as long as a page is cacheable, because Type 3 sends does always a front-end session for everything. I don't know why. Someone thought it's a good idea. But Varnish will remove that as long as the page is cacheable and there are no int objects. And there is one downside in this entire thing, and that it's those bans. If you tell Varnish that a given page was altered, whatever, those bans are quite expensive. On very big sites with a lot of bans, Varnish would use a lot of CPU to process those bans. And there is this Hash Ninja plugin, which is a commercial model available, which changed that on Varnish side. But we have a few quite big sites with a couple of 10,000 pages where we don't run into this problem by now. I don't know how big a site has to be that it's a problem, but it could be a problem. So installation, you just install the extension. The extension does nothing by default, so you can just install it on any system. With the other extensions, we had some. It was very difficult because you had to, when you install it on a live system, it was possible that something breaks. For example, the one extension disables front-end sessions at all and only enables them for front-end user logins. But there are a lot of extensions which need a user session, for example, a newsletter registration with email confirmation or whatever. So those things got broken, and that won't happen with our extension. And the only one thing to configure is the sys reverse proxy IP, which you have to set to the Varnish server IP. So type 3 knows that this request comes in through a reverse proxy server. That's all. And of course, install Varnish and the VCL, which is provided in the extension, and change IP address, whatever you want to do. Then you have an implementation which caches everything in Varnish as long as there is no front-end user session, which means no cache to one, no int objects. And it could be that you have to modify your site, or if you do something new, then you have to keep it in mind, as always. The alternative is to use Ajax calls with JavaScript on EID requests, for example, and retrieve your dynamic data through this. For example, on typo3.org, the front-end user login is based on JavaScript and Ajax, which loads just the user information in the background, but the whole site is cached every time. A very important thing is the proper use of the HTTP methods. I see it a lot that it's totally mixed, because it would be good to use get to get data and post to post data, as it's named already. Because post requests won't never be cached, because you submit a form or whatever, some action, which we want cached in Varnish. And if you do that, there are a lot of extensions which use Ajax calls, which use post all the time. I don't know why. You have to keep that in mind, and normally it's quite easy to change. And then you can decide, you can do some magic in VCL in the configuration language, for example, force caching for a given page or page tree. If you are sure that there is nothing which can break, but you have no time or money to change everything on typo3 side, for example, to move all user int objects into user objects, you can just force it on Varnish. Or, for example, remove cookies, because there is on every site the Google Analytics cookie, if Google Analytics is used, and you never need that on the server, so you can just throw it away in VCL. Yeah, then a few implementations we did the last time. One of them is Standardch. Standard is a grocery chain with 500 stores all over Switzerland. And they do weekly mailings with email newsletters, but also snail mail. And those mailings are delivered every Tuesday and include special offers of this week and also a lottery where you can win some whatever, I don't know. And all the housewives in Switzerland are they wait on this Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock, to get the newest offers. So before, there were every Tuesday a huge overload on this server because they want to check in and participate at the lottery. And the load time of this page was about 5 seconds through these times. And we did a lot, it's down there. This server had about 20 gigabytes of memory and 8 CPU cores, so it was quite fast. But still, there were times where the server went down at all because it were just too much people. So we implemented Varnish and had a load time for 50 milliseconds afterwards, and no overloads because it just works. And the memory, we were able to give those server 2 gigabytes of memory instead of 20 before, and go down from 8 cores to 1 core. And this service is quite bored now. And another one is Branchch, which is a site to manage Branchch on farms in Switzerland on the Swiss national holiday, which is the 1st of August. It's a tradition that you go to a farm and eat your breakfast there on this day. And on this site, you can search through all the farms to decide where do you want to go. And of course, it's a huge traffic peaks, 1, 2, 3 days before the 1st of August, and all the other days in the year, nobody cares. And we had some major problems the years before because the application was just totally unscalable. It was type 3, of course, but with a custom extension to search those farms. And we put in 30 gigabytes of RAM, 24 cores, whatever we had on hardware available, but still were times where the site went down, which is very bad because there are just, the time window is just very fast, just a few days before. And so we decided to replace this search function. It's now JavaScript based and fetches this data through a JSON file. In this JSON file is every farm of Switzerland included on the client. And it's about, I think, 30 kilobytes, so it's not too much. And the whole search functionality is on client-based now. No more server calls, whatever. And after this, there is no measurable load through this time on this server. You just see nothing. Beside of there is a lot of network traffic, of course. And there is a hotline who you can call and ask questions, things like that. And they had a lot of work to do before because the site was just unusable sometimes, and now they are also quite bored because everything went smooth and fast. And the last one is Coordinatingch, which is a company who collects information for insurance and bank institutes like that, which are law related. They process some law stuff and try to explain that, things like that. They have not too many visitors, I think about 1,000 a day, something like that. But they have huge peaks during training sessions because they make some trainings every second month, something like that, where all of those customers come together and the boss of this company tell them how to use the website and what's up with new decisions from courts and whatever. And so they used to go to the sites all at the same time, which was quite slow then. So we decided to implement Varnish too, but it was a little bit difficult because, of course, the access is protected. It's the reason of this company, after all, to give protected access with those informations, and you have to pay for it. So by default, it won't be possible to cache this in Varnish, but we did an additional extension, which just sets an additional cookie on the client which includes a hash with the user group of this user. And this hash is used by Varnish as additional cache hash, like the whole URL plus the cache hash of the user group. So everyone who belongs to the same groups share his cache on Varnish. And so also here, it's very fast. The only request which isn't cached is the user login. Yeah, more information about Varnish are available on the internet. There is the varnishcache.org site with the Varnish MISC mailing list, where quite a lot of traffic and questions go around, where you can learn a lot. Or commercial, our site, snowflake.ch Varnish or varnishsoftware.com. The extension for Varnish is managed on GitHub, and you can download it through the extension repository, of course. And last one, we are a hosting and integration partner for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. We do hosting, implementation, and consulting, and if you have ever the need for some Varnish license, approach us, because we can give you discount for agencies on those subscription editions. Yeah, so thank you. And if you have some questions, you can approach me later on. There is the social event, I think, and I'm here tomorrow.
Maybe just some small question. Did you share your BCA configuration for Varnish?
Yes?
Yeah, it's on your GitHub.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So, thank you.